if you know what you want to be, you have to have some true convictions and you have to be able to take some criticism. You got to be able to take some hits and be like, I just don't care what you have to say about me.
Hello, and welcome to Behind Numbers, the podcast where we look beyond the surface to uncover what's not visible from the outside, the real stories behind today's business and finance leaders. I'm your host, Alessandro Cozzi, and today I'm more than thrilled to be joined by Joy Mbanugo, CFO at CXAI, a publicly traded SaaS company using AI to reshape how we experience workspaces. Joy's career spans across Google, BlackRock, EY, and ServiceRocket, where she has built a reputation for transforming finance organizations and leading through change. But what really stands out is her journey, one built on resilience, reinvention, and breaking barriers in leadership. Welcome to Behind Numbers, Joy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm really more than happy to have you here. I've got so many questions to ask, and it's obvious that then during the podcast, given your tech background and your knowledge about AI, I would like to know more about how you can bring AI inside a company, inside a team, the steps that you would follow. But prior to going that, let's start from the beginning. So, Joy, your career started at EY and took you all the way to leading finance at some of the most respected global firms. Looking back, what first sparked your interest in finance and what kept you pushing forward even when the path wasn't easy or clear?
So I got an interest in finance actually in high school. So I'm going to age myself, but that's okay. People can look it up. It's publicly available. When I was in high school, I was sitting next to a classmate in library during study hall, and he was looking at the stock page. So back in the day, you would get the tickers, it went on CNBC, but you'd get the paper and you'd see like the previous day. And so he would look at it and I got interested because I'm just nosy. And I'm like, what are you looking at? And he's like, I'm looking at the stock prices. We're in high school, mind you. I think we're like in 10th grade now. I want to know about stock prices. And so that sparked my interest in finance. My mom and dad and my whole family, they kind of told me I had to be a lawyer. So like, it kind of came organically from just having an interest in finance. And I was like always interested in investing in capital markets. And my first investment was in college, and I invested enough money to send myself to Spain for a month. And so I've always had an interest in finance. And then it just kind of blossomed when I went to college and studied accounting. And I wanted to do accounting finance dual major, but it was super hard. So I ended up doing accounting and something else in like an interdisciplinary degree. So short answer is from tickers in the Cincinnati Enquirer.
Why your parents wanted you to be a lawyer instead of going into finance?
I think because of what they knew, right? Like they understood the world of finance a little bit, but like I'll give you a reference. Like my mom growing up was a children's librarian and she had a degree in psychology, and my dad was a social worker and is still an minister and a preacher. And so like to them, finance is such a nebulous term. So like investment banking, probably like they wouldn't have known to be like, hey, go work at Goldman Sachs. So they were like, my brother's name is Michael. Joy, you're going to be a lawyer. Michael, you're going to be an engineer. And we ended up doing exactly that. And that was like their way of picking out what they deemed successful careers for us.
And so you started studying finance. Was it always easy? And when you got out from college, was it easy to find your first job? You knew where you wanted to be, or did it just happen?
It just happened, and I got really lucky because at the time I was coming out of school, even though it was after 9/11, things had kind of stabilized. And it's funny, I was talking to someone about this earlier today. You don't see this on my LinkedIn profile, but I interned at Anderson for 3 summers. So I had an introduction to public accounting very early. I started interning, I think I was 18 when I started interning in public accounting. What generally would have happened is I would have gone to Anderson, but in between Anderson and graduating and a whole bunch of other things, Anderson kind of blew up and went poof and went away. And so I ended up getting lucky through an alumni connection, getting a job at EY. And that's how I got my job at EY. And because I was at Case Western, which is a great school in Cleveland. I came from Miami, which in the Midwest is known for a strong accounting program. And I had interned at Anderson. So I had an advantage to start my career in accounting.
Did you like all the time that you spent in public accounting, or there were some of the things that you loved and some of the things that you didn't like, or maybe it was a very good school for what you've done then
Yeah.
afterwards?
Yeah. If you asked me at the time, I didn't necessarily love being an auditor. However, sitting in a seat as a public company CFO today is probably one of the most valuable things I've ever done in my career, just because it gives you a foundation for accounting. And so the audits were hard, long hours, taking in time with pencils and use this color for that and that color for this and this tick. Like it was just a lot to pick up, but I'm very grateful for that experience. And yes, I spent over 11 years at EY, and it was just a great training school. I learned tax, regulatory stuff, auditing, just how to like function, how to run a business, a lot of structure. So one of the things I pride myself on is being a structured person. And a lot of that structure and training came from EY.
I had a similar path, but I wanted to ask you is, after those so many years there, how could you choose your next step? Why
Yeah.
did you choose?
Why? Oh, so okay. What happened? EY was at EY Cleveland in audit and at law school at night at the same time. Then I went to capital markets tax in DC. Then I moved to international tax capital markets, same type of regulatory role in London. So I didn't really want to leave London, but I totally understand visa issues because I did not have the right visa to stay in the country. I had to leave and I couldn't switch jobs, even though I was like being offered jobs by London-based companies. I had to leave. And so I ended up in California, just kind of like on a fluke. It wasn't on my radar. I thought I was going to go to New York or I was going to stay in London. California, because I was so entrenched in finance and like banks, and I love finance as a function as a CFO, but also investment banking, asset management, and insurance companies. So those were my clients. Tech was not on my radar. I don't know why. And the accounting and finance fairies had a very different plan for me.
I see. And so you were moving from EY and then going to BlackRock and then going to Google, which I'm sure that it meant shifting from the traditional finance to the fast moving world of tech. So what was the transition like? And what did you have to maybe unlearn or reframe?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I moved from EY to BlackRock, that was a huge transition because it's different giving advice in a vacuum. And this is no offense to any of the like accounting firms, but you're not living with the advice. It's different when you have to implement it and live it. And so when I got to BlackRock, it was like, wait, I have a limited budget to ask an advisor questions, and whatever memo format they give me, I got to be able to take that memo in their phone call, whatever limited advice or PowerPoint deck, and implement it. That was a huge transition. And I think, again, some of my background at EY, and when I worked at London, I was seconded to a client. I had already kind of had that training and understood you got to be very careful what you tell clients because you give advice and you have a lot of caveats, but sometimes it's not practical. And what clients want to hear is just tell me what to do. That's all I want to know. And so that was a huge transition. And then going from the finance world to tech, that also was a transition, but BlackRock is a fast moving company. So I was used to the pace. So the pace wasn't a problem. It was just shifting a mindset to a different product.
I see. You are very vocal also on LinkedIn, also with some other podcasts that I've seen. I wanted to ask you, early in your career, especially as a woman of color in finance, what were some of the moments that truly tested your resilience? And how did you take those experiences and shape how you lead today?
Yeah. So there are a few. One, there are a couple I can remember like clear as day. So I remember when I was graduating law school and I wanted to move offices and I worked in Cleveland. There was a partner is probably since retired, who was like, you're making a big mistake leaving Cleveland, because EY Cleveland at that time was one of the best offices to be in. It was one of the biggest offices, it was one of the best client bases outside of like Chicago, New York. And I remember him telling me that. And I was like, okay, you're saying that over going to Washington, D.C. to work with the tax experts, like people who come from Capitol Hill. And I was just like, no, dude. I didn't agree with him, but I also had other partners who were supporting me. And my main partner that I worked for, he was like, don't listen to him. He just wants you to stay here. You're going to DC. You have a bright career. You're graduating law school. You got to get out of Cleveland. And so I went. That's one. And then another time I had, when I was going to law school at night, I had someone tell me like, well, this was in the middle of an audit. Well, you need to miss class because it was an intense audit. And I don't know if a lot of lawyers listen to this, but like, you can't miss a lot of classes in law school. Like, you just can't go missing. Even though your grade is based on one exam, you can miss one day, and that could be the most important concept. You can't miss certain things in torts and contracts and all that stuff. And I think it was my first year. And I was just like, again, no. And people ask me, like, what are one of your personality traits? I am tough. My dad raised me to have very strong opinions and to speak up for myself. Even if I'm not vocal and not combative, like, I have a strong sense of the direction I want to go. And so when I'm faced with adversity, or even like at times where I told people I wanted to be a CFO and some people just were incredulous. I even remember, I won't say at what company, someone saying to me like, what makes you think you could be a CFO? And I didn't let that bother me, because someone else was on the call and they heard that and they were like, Joy, that was deep. And I'm not worried about that person. I just couldn't care. And I think what a lot of people need to be able to do in their career, and it's really hard right now because the economy is crazy from a job standpoint, but if you know what you want to be, you have to have some true convictions, and you have to be able to take some criticism. You got to be able to take some hits and be like, I just don't care what you have to say about me. Now, I'm not saying that in the context of like feedback in your job and all that, but like when you go out into the world and you tell people what you want to be and they come back and they tell you no, you got to just block the noise. It's like horse. You know, when horses are racing and they're in the derby and they have those blinders on, you got to have those blinders on. I'm not calling myself a horse, but you got to have one of those blinders.
Well, honestly, I now do know why your parents thought that you would have been a great lawyer. But you are now a great finance leader, and currently you are the CFO at CXAI, right?
Yes, yes.
So first, why don't you tell us about what is the company and what is the company trying to solve?
Yes. So the company is trying to solve the great return to office kerfuffle, right? So everyone is saying right now, return to office 3 days a week, 4 days a week, 2 days a week. And you go to that office and you go here and this way and that way. But the companies sold their buildings. And if you look at it, I won't name any companies, but you could read the articles. This company required everybody to come back to the office. People showed up. They didn't have anywhere to sit. They didn't have a desk. They couldn't get food. They couldn't get parking. Just a whole host of issues. And so what CXAI is an employee experience company looking to solve that, so that people have somewhere to make the return to office process and just your whole workday experience seamless. And so that's the front end, and like what you see, that's the main product. But then what's even more important and interesting from a finance standpoint, and what the finance teams like to see, is the analytics behind it. Where are people, what offices are busiest, where are people sitting, what time, what day, and all this. And so we also provide analytics behind that and then now adding in more AI capabilities like voice automated desk booking and things like that. So super, super cool.
Fantastic. And it seems, and tell me if I'm wrong, that at CXAI, you're helping shape a company that lives really in the intersection of AI, workplace innovation, and finance.
Yes. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, how do you see technology, especially AI, changing the way that CFOs make decisions and lead teams today?
So the way I look at AI, both from a technical standpoint, because my background is very tax accounting technical, I am a lawyer. So like that aspect of it, I think helps on the research side, but there are hallucinations. So I do have to have that caveat, but I think it's like an enabler, right? So instead of things taking 5 days or memo writing taking days, it can cut down the time to days and hours. There's some really cool things in Perplexity. If you're a public company CFO, Perplexity is super cool. Just go type in your ticker symbol and it'll give you a whole host of analysis from an analyst point of view, which is good if you're a public company CFO. And I just go click down. And so prepping for earnings call, that's cool. The other thing for everyone in the finance function, more finance and accounting, is just modeling. There's a gentleman on LinkedIn who shows you how to create like 13-week cash forecasts using Claude. So the way I view it is like having an analyst in your pocket instead of having to walk around and talk to an analyst and like, build me a forecast. Like CFO can come up with a back of the envelope forecast on their own. I've done this before in ChatGPT. I just put in a couple of inputs and then generated a forecast. And then I sent it to my team. I said, okay, now you dig down into it and you perfect it. But this is the premise and the format that I want you to use.
Interesting. So to all the companies out there, how they could bring AI inside the company. I mean, we are always hearing about this revolution, but how can really companies start bringing in AI in a smart way? Do they need to start thinking about creating a massive project that is going to change the whole company? Or is there a way to bring it gradually?
I think there's a way to bring it in gradually. I think we're not at the point where there are tools that are just so great where if you're not using this particular tool or this particular LLM or this particular agent, you're missing out. I think we're going to get there, right? I don't think we're there yet. What I would recommend is get one of the LLMs behind your firewall and get permission to put certain company data in the LLM, because if you can train your own LLM and if you get to the point where you can use some agentic capabilities with Copilot and with Claude and with ChatGPT, the output can be amazing. So I would say gradually. And then as technology develops and as a lot of these close, ARAP and FP&A tools, and even as the ERP systems kind of evolve, because everybody says that they have AI, but some of it is just really built on top of existing LLM models. So they're built on top of Gemini or they're built on top of 11 Labs or something like that. Until that gets super developed, I think like gradually is the way to go.
So let me ask you, and let me tell you if I get it right. So you would first bring it in on a personal level. So you would first start to give to the employees the tools that they can use on an employee level for then expanding it to the whole company. Is it that the case?
Yeah. And then what's super, super cool about some of the tools, I won't call them out because I want to be tool agnostic, but if you use one tool, there's a way for and it gets behind your firewall, teams can collaborate within an LLM, which for me is like, oh, mind blowing. Very cool.
And since you have used some of those tools, and again, I don't want to mention any of the tools, but can you just tell us which are the things that you have done that really you can see the value from day one?
Yeah. I would say a lot on the probably top of mind for me because I'm thinking about earnings, but a lot on the investor relations side, a lot on the earnings prep side, creating slides for earnings prep, creating scripts for earnings, using the current flux analysis and looking at trends year over year, quarter over quarter. So for me, and again, this is probably because it's just top of mind, super valuable in that point. Probably second is memo writing. Again, I have to write a lot of technical memos, and so it's been helpful in that front. I don't suggest you just rely on an LLM to write a memo for you. The lawyer in me is going to tell you you need to go back and verify all of your sources. You need to make sure that your analysis makes sense and your conclusions. And because LLMs do hallucinate and you can get back something totally wrong and you don't want to be given out. So buyer beware, trust but verify. And then modeling, I think just some of the capabilities are unmatched.
It seems that you're using all these tools for, in a sense, giving you some superpowers. I do have the feeling that you're not thinking as some other leaders out there that we are doomed
Yeah, I don't think we're doomed. I do think we are going to have a challenge with folks entering the workplace now where and even I look at my kids, they're going to grow up in the age of AI, right? AI is just going to be a second language or LLMs are going to be an afterthought for them. So how does that make you dumber? Does that make you smarter? And I think pushing people to understand the source, and it's like having a calculator. You need to be able to do division by hand, right? Like we all had to learn how to multiply by hand and do like long division and long multiplication. I would say the same thing for using AI. We need to know how to model by hand in Excel. Is it painful? Yes. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not. Should you do it a couple of times so that you can check what your whatever you get from an LLM is? Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I am a super fan of using these tools, but again, for giving you superpowers. So
Yeah.
I am really
Yeah.
bullish on how we will see our future and how we can really use those tech for
Yeah.
doing more and for doing maybe less repetitive tasks, but really
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
on a strategic level.
Yeah.
So
Before you even get into AI, you got to think about automation. So if you haven't even thought about process and automation, you need to start there, then layer in AI. So that's why I say I think we're still early because there are a lot of fixes, but there's no silver bullet, for lack of a better term.
agree. We always close our podcast with one question. If you could go back and change one thing, only one thing, that it could be a decision or tell your younger self something that you wish you knew at that time, what would it be and why?
Oh, someone else asked me this question. I would probably have spent more time in audit, which is such a painful thing to say. But sitting in the seat as a public company CFO, and even for CFOs that are sitting in PE-backed, VC-backed companies that are going to go public or have an event, just the technical accounting that you need to know or be versed in, or the audit procedures that you need to be versed in for those types of events are unmatched. And if you know that and knowing that and having lived through that younger, I think is invaluable experience. And so that's probably like when I look back at my career, I don't know if I would necessarily change it, but that would be one thing that probably would have been more valuable for me.
Joy, thank you so much for sharing your journey. It has been a
Yes.
pleasure having you
Thank
on
you.
Behind Numbers.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us. If you have enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow Behind Numbers for more stories from the leaders shaping the future of business and finance. I'm Alessandro Cozzi. See you next time.